What would you do if your husband handed you divorce papers on the very day you received a big promotion at work? Can he really prove everything when I've been so careful to hide my secret? The moment those legal documents hit the kitchen table, I realized my game was finally up. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. But let me start from the beginning, when I thought I had everything under control. The dining room felt suffocating despite the open windows. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing what should have been a celebration dinner, complete with Harris's favorite pot roast and my mother's famous apple pie. The promotion letter from Gorski Logistics sat prominently displayed on the kitchen counter, and I couldn't stop glancing at it with satisfaction. "So tell us again about this promotion, sweetheart," my mother Elaine said, cutting into her roast with deliberate precision. "Senior Administrative Coordinator sounds so important." I beamed, twirling my wine glass between my fingers. "It really is a big deal, Mom. Mr. Gorski said I was the obvious choice. He's been so impressed with my dedication and the extra hours I've been putting in." Harris barely looked up from his plate. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he mechanically chewed his food, those brown eyes that used to light up when I entered a room, now distant and preoccupied. At 36, he still had that awkward, reserved demeanor that had attracted me in college, but lately it just irritated me. "Harris, aren't you proud of your wife?" Denise, his mother, asked pointedly. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual severe bun, and her pale blue eyes studied him with concern. "This is quite an achievement." "Of course," Harris mumbled, finally meeting my gaze. "Congratulations, Eulalia. I'm sure you worked very hard for it." Something in his tone made my stomach flutter with unease, but I pushed the feeling aside. "I did work hard. Someone around here should appreciate that." "What's that supposed to mean?" Harris asked quietly. I laughed, the sound coming out sharper than I intended. "Nothing, honey. Just that it's nice to have my efforts recognized at work, that's all." 7-year-old Maddie looked between us with those wide green eyes she inherited from me. "Daddy, why do you look sad? Mommy got a promotion. Isn't that good?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Harris's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he forced a smile for our daughter. "Of course it's good, sweetheart. Daddy's just tired from work." "You're always tired lately," I said, unable to keep the accusation out of my voice. "Maybe if you showed a little more ambition, you'd understand what it takes to get ahead." Denise's fork clinked against her plate. "Eulalia, dear, I'm sure Harris works plenty hard. IT specialists carry a lot of responsibility." "I'm not saying he doesn't work hard," I backpedaled, realizing how that sounded. "I just mean that some people are naturally more driven, more willing to go the extra mile." My phone buzzed against my leg where I'd tucked it under the napkin. My pulse quickened as I saw Patrick's name on the screen. The message was simple. "Congratulations again. You deserve everything you're getting." I typed back quickly under the table. "Thank you. Wish I could celebrate properly with you." When I looked up, Harris was staring directly at me, not at my face but at my hands moving beneath the table. Our eyes met for a split second, and I saw something there I'd never seen before: suspicion. "Who's texting during dinner?" Denise asked disapprovingly. "Just Janet from work," I lied smoothly. "She's excited about my promotion too. At least someone appreciates good news." Harris stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me, I need some air." As he walked toward the back door, I caught him glancing at my phone again. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. "He's been acting strange lately," I said to fill the uncomfortable silence. "I think he might be jealous of my success. Some men can't handle it when their wives outshine them." "Eulalia Marie," my mother said firmly, "that's your husband you're talking about." "I know, Mom. I'm just saying that Harris has always been comfortable with mediocrity. This promotion represents everything he's afraid to reach for." Maddie pushed her peas around her plate. I don't like it when you and Daddy are mad. We're not mad, sweetheart, I assured her, reaching over to smooth her blonde hair. Grown-ups just have different ways of showing excitement. But even as I said it, I could see Harris through the window, pacing on the back deck with his phone pressed to his ear. His free hand gestured emphatically as he spoke, and I wondered who he was calling. His brother Toby, probably. Or maybe his mother had given him some lecture about being more supportive. The rest of dinner passed in stilted conversation. Denise asked pointed questions about my new responsibilities, and I found myself being vague about the details. The truth was, Patrick hadn't been entirely clear about what the promotion actually entailed, beyond a 15% salary increase and a private office. It's wonderful that Mr. Gorski recognizes talent, Elaine said as she helped clear the dishes. You always were destined for great things. Patrick, Mr. Gorski, he really is an exceptional leader, I said, unable to keep the warmth out of my voice when I spoke his name. He sees potential where others might overlook it. Denise paused in the doorway, a stack of plates balanced in her hands. Patrick, you're on a first-name basis with your boss? Heat crept up my neck. Well, we work closely together. It's a collaborative environment. How closely? The question was innocent enough, but Denise's tone carried an edge. Mother Vane, I think you're reading too much into workplace dynamics, I said with a forced laugh. This isn't the 1950s. Professional relationships are more casual now. Harris returned as we were serving dessert, his expression unreadable. He kissed Maddie's forehead and took his seat without meeting my eyes. Feel better? I asked. Much, he said simply. The apple pie tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Every time I looked at Harris, he seemed to be studying me with those analytical eyes that made him so good at debugging computer systems. I felt like a program he was trying to understand, searching for the error in my code. After dessert, as our families prepared to leave, Denise pulled Harris aside in the hallway. I strained to hear their whispered conversation from the kitchen. Something's not right, I caught her saying. I know, Mom, I'm handling it. That promotion came out of nowhere, and she's been working late almost every night for months. I said I'm handling it. My blood ran cold. How much did they suspect? I'd been so careful, so strategic about everything. The late nights had perfectly reasonable explanations. The promotion was based on merit, mostly, and Patrick was always discreet about our meetings. Eulalia, Harris called from the living room. Can you come here for a minute? I found him standing by the front door, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His brown hair was disheveled from running his fingers through it, a nervous habit I'd noticed increasing lately. What's wrong? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to say congratulations again, properly this time. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm proud of you, really. Something about his tone made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to smile back. Thank you, honey. That means everything to me. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with the cool night air. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen for this quiet, steady man who'd promised to love me forever. Then my phone buzzed again, and the moment shattered. Harris's eyes flicked to my purse where the sound had come from. Popular tonight. Probably just Mom, I said quickly. You know how she gets excited. But as I watched Harris say goodbye to his mother, I saw them exchange another meaningful look. Denise squeezed his shoulder and whispered something that made his jaw clench. After everyone left and Maddie was tucked into bed, I found Harris in his home office, staring at his computer screen. The blue light cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older than his 36 years. Working late again? I asked from the doorway. Just catching up on some things. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. You know how it is with demanding jobs. The emphasis on demanding wasn't lost on me. I stepped into the room, noting the scattered papers on his desk and the legal pad covered in his careful handwriting. Harris, is everything okay? You seem distant lately. He finally turned to face me, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger or hurt. It was the cold, calculating look he got when he was solving a particularly complex problem. "Everything's fine, Eulalia. Just trying to figure out a few things." "What kind of things?" "Work stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." But as I headed upstairs to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Harris was lying. And if he was lying, what did that mean for everything I'd worked so hard to build? I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Harris slept beside me. His breathing was even and deep, but somehow I didn't believe he was really asleep. Every small sound made me jump. The house settling, the neighbor's cat yowling, the distant hum of traffic. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent now but heavy with the weight of secrets. Patrick's congratulatory message felt less like celebration and more like evidence. Evidence of what, exactly? We'd been careful, professional, nothing anyone could prove. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, Harris's words echoed in my mind. "I'm handling it." What exactly was he handling? The office felt different after everyone went home. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light that made the beige cubicles look even more depressing than usual. I'd been staying late for months now, but tonight felt charged with possibility. My new nameplate hadn't arrived yet, but Patrick had already moved me to the corner cubicle with the window view. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Real, tangible progress that proved I was finally getting what I deserved. Working hard or hardly working? I spun around to find Patrick Gorski leaning against my cubicle wall, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder and his tie loosened around his neck. At 49, he had that distinguished silver at the temples look that made him stand out in a sea of younger, less polished men. His smile was warm but cautious as he glanced around the empty office. "Just reviewing the quarterly reports," I said, though the spreadsheet on my screen was mostly for show. "I want to make sure I'm ready for my new responsibilities." Dedicated as always. He moved closer, and I caught his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made my pulse quicken. "That's what I've always admired about you, Eulalia. Your commitment to excellence." The way he said my name sent a shiver down my spine. Patrick had this way of making everything sound important, significant. When Harris said my name, it was just a word. When Patrick said it, it felt like poetry. "I learned from the best," I replied, meeting his gaze. "Did you enjoy dinner with your family, celebrating your success?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. Harris barely acknowledged it. I think he's threatened by my advancement. Patrick's expression grew concerned. "That must be difficult. A spouse should be your biggest supporter." "You'd think so." I turned back to my computer, letting my frustration show. Sometimes I wonder if he even sees me as a person anymore, just the woman who does his laundry and raises his daughter. "His daughter?" Patrick raised an eyebrow. "Our daughter," I corrected quickly. "Maddie. She's 7. "You're far too vibrant and intelligent to be taken for granted," Patrick said softly. He moved behind my chair, and I felt the heat of his presence. Some men don't know how to appreciate what they have. My phone rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Harris's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a stab of guilt mixed with annoyance. "Hi, honey," I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. "Hey, just wondering when you'll be home. It's almost 9. I'm still catching up on reports. This promotion comes with a lot of new responsibilities." On a Friday night. I glanced at Patrick, who was listening with obvious interest. "Success doesn't keep business hours, Harris. I thought you'd understand that." "Right. Well, don't stay too late, and be careful walking to your car." "I'm fine. The security guard does regular rounds." "Okay. See you when you get home." After I hung up, Patrick shook his head sympathetically. "Checking up on you?" "He worries," I said, though Patrick's disapproval made me defensive of Harris to spite myself. Worry is one thing, control is another. Patrick straightened, putting professional distance between us again. but we should probably wrap up soon. Can't have people talking. What would they say? That I'm showing favoritism to my newest senior coordinator? His smile was playful but carried an edge of warning. We both know how office gossip can spiral. I saved my work and gathered my purse, hyper-aware of Patrick's eyes following my movements. Same time Monday. Actually, I was thinking we might start meeting earlier. 7:30 before the office fills up. We can go over your new projects without interruptions. The suggestion sent a thrill through me. More time alone with Patrick, away from prying eyes and Harris's suspicious questions. That sounds perfect. As I walked to my car, I noticed the security guard making his rounds near the loading dock. He nodded politely, and I wondered what he thought about employees staying so late. Did he notice patterns? Did he keep logs? The drive home gave me time to decompress and plan. Harris would want details about my day, my new role, my timeline for coming home. I needed to be ready with answers that satisfied his curiosity without revealing anything problematic. The house was quiet when I arrived. Harris's office light was on, which meant he was probably working on some freelance project or playing those strategy games he loved. Maddie was long asleep, her room dark except for the princess nightlight she refused to give up. I found Harris exactly where I expected, hunched over his computer with a cup of cold coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. But something was different about his setup tonight. Multiple browser windows were open, and I caught glimpses of what looked like spreadsheets and calendar applications. "Hey," I said softly. "Sorry I'm so late." "No problem. How are the reports?" "Exhausting but necessary. Patrick wants me to be fully prepared for Monday." Harris turned in his chair to face me. "Patrick again. You mention him a lot lately." "He's my boss, Harris. Of course I mention him." "Right." He studied my face with that analytical expression that always made me uncomfortable. "Did you eat dinner?" "I grabbed a sandwich from the vending machine." The lie came easily. Patrick and I had shared Chinese takeout in the conference room, talking about everything except work, while the sun set outside the windows. "There's leftover pot roast in the fridge." "Thanks, but I'm not really hungry. I think I'll just shower and go to bed." As I headed for the stairs, Harris called after me. "Eulalia, tomorrow's Saturday. Maybe we could do something as a family. Take Maddie to the park, have a picnic." I paused, with my hand on the banister. "That sounds nice, but I might need to come in for a few hours. Transition period, you know." The silence stretched between us until I couldn't stand it anymore. I climbed the stairs without looking back, but I could feel his eyes on me until I disappeared around the corner. The hot shower felt amazing after the long day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting at home. Harris's questions were becoming more pointed, his observations more careful, and his mother's comments at dinner had been particularly sharp. But what could they actually prove? That I worked late? That I had a good relationship with my boss? That I was finally getting the recognition I deserved after years of being undervalued? I was toweling my hair when I heard Harris's footsteps on the stairs. He moved quietly, probably trying not to wake Maddie, but I knew his patterns well enough to track his progress. He paused outside our bedroom door for longer than usual before finally coming in. "Everything okay?" I asked, watching him in the mirror as I applied my skincare routine. "Fine, just turning off the lights downstairs." He went through his own bedtime routine with mechanical precision, brushing teeth, changing clothes, setting his phone on the charger. But I noticed he positioned it differently than usual, angled toward my side of the bed rather than his own. "Harris, are you sure everything's okay? You've seemed distracted lately." He climbed into bed and turned to face me. In the dim light from the hallway, his expression was unreadable. "Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." "Want to talk about it?" "Not really, but thanks." I settled under the covers, expecting him to roll over and go to sleep like he usually did. Instead, he continued watching me with those dark eyes. "Eulalia?" "Yeah?" I love you. You know that, right? The words should have warmed me, but something about his tone made them sound like a goodbye. I love you too. Good. Just wanted to make sure you knew. He finally turned away, leaving me staring at the ceiling in the dark. My phone sat silent on the nightstand, but I found myself wanting to text Patrick, to share the strange conversation, to get his perspective on Harris's behavior. But that would be crossing a line, wouldn't it? Bringing my marriage problems to my boss, even if he was also, what? A friend? A confidant? Something more? I pushed the thoughts away and tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back to Harris's words. Why did I love you sound so much like I'm sorry? Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. At least at work, things made sense. Patrick appreciated me, valued my contributions, saw my potential. At home, I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to decode Harris's moods and navigate his family's barely concealed suspicions. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the image of Harris's legal pad covered in notes. What was he working on that required so much documentation? And why did I have the sinking feeling that it had something to do with me? The weekend stretched ahead like a minefield, full of family time and careful conversations. I just had to get through it without revealing anything that could be used against me later. Because despite what Patrick said about people talking, I was beginning to suspect that the real danger wasn't office gossip, it was my own husband. The downtown cafe buzzed with Saturday morning energy, the kind of place where suburban families gathered to feel cosmopolitan while their children ate overpriced pancakes shaped like cartoon characters. I'd suggested meeting here because it was neutral territory, somewhere I could control the narrative without Harris's home office and mysterious legal pads looming in the background. Janet Lee had arrived first, her auburn hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. At 33, she had that polished look of someone who'd never quite outgrown her sorority days. She waved enthusiastically from a corner table, already armed with mimosas and gossip. "There's our rising star," Janet called out as I approached, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "Senior Administrative Coordinator, Eulalia Vane, everyone." I felt my cheeks warm with pleasure and embarrassment. "Janet, you're going to get us kicked out." "For celebrating success? Never." She stood to hug me, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume mixed with champagne. "I ordered us the good stuff. This calls for proper celebration." Harris followed behind me with Maddie's hand clasped firmly in his expression carefully neutral. He'd been quiet during the drive over, responding to my chatter about work with non-committal hums and single-word answers. "Morning, Janet," he said politely, helping Maddie into her booster seat. "Harris, how does it feel to be married to the most successful woman in logistics?" I watched Harris's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I'm proud of Eulalia's accomplishments." "As you should be. Patrick Gorski doesn't hand out promotions to just anyone. Eulalia must have really impressed him." The way Janet said Patrick's name made me wince. There was a knowing quality to her tone that suggested she suspected more than she was saying. We'd been friends since college, and she'd always been good at reading between the lines. My mother arrived in a flurry of air kisses and compliments, followed by Denise and Toby. The contrast between the two older women was stark. Elaine in her flowing floral dress and statement jewelry, Denise in her practical navy cardigan and sensible shoes. "Darling, you look radiant," Elaine gushed, settling into the chair beside me. "Success agrees with you." "Thank you, Mom. I feel like I'm finally where I belong professionally." Denise took the seat across from me, her pale blue eyes studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. "It's certainly been a rapid rise. How long have you been with Gorski Logistics now?" 3 years, I replied, though something about her tone put me on edge. "And you've been working directly with Mr. Gorski for how long?" "About 8 months, since the Henderson account." "Ah, yes, the Henderson account." Denise's smile was thin. "That required a lot of late nights, didn't it?" Harris looked up from cutting Maddie's pancakes. Mum, maybe we could focus on celebrating instead of conducting an interview. I'm just interested in Eulalia's career development. It's not every day someone receives such a significant promotion. Janet leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think Patrick Gorski has excellent taste in recognizing talent. Some bosses wouldn't know potential if it bit them on the ass. Language, Harris murmured, glancing at Maddie. Sorry, sweetie, Janet said to our daughter. Some bosses wouldn't know potential if it surprised them very much. Toby, who'd been quietly nursing his coffee, finally spoke up. So, what does the new position involve exactly? I found myself being vague about the details again. The truth was, Patrick still hadn't given me a clear job description beyond special projects and executive liaison duties. It's a lot of strategic planning and client relations. Patrick values my insight on operational efficiency. Patrick again, Denise observed. You seem to have developed quite a close working relationship. Heat crept up my neck. We work well together. He appreciates employees who go above and beyond. I'm sure he does. There was something sharp in Denise's voice that made the mimosa turn sour in my mouth. Elaine jumped to my defense. Denise, you sound almost suspicious. Eulalia has worked incredibly hard for this opportunity. I'm not questioning her work ethic. I'm questioning the circumstances. What circumstances? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Denise leaned back in her chair, her gaze never wavering from my face. A sudden promotion after months of late nights and weekend work. A boss who's on a first-name basis with his employees. A husband who's been looking increasingly concerned about his wife's schedule. The table fell silent except for the clatter of Maddie's fork against her plate. Even Janet seemed stunned by the directness of the accusation. Mother, Harris said quietly, this isn't the time or place. Isn't it? When is the appropriate time to address the elephant in the room? I felt my carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. I don't know what you're implying, but I don't appreciate the insinuation. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts and asking questions. You're being paranoid and insulting, I shot back, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Just because you can't imagine a woman succeeding on her own merits doesn't mean there's some conspiracy. Elaine reached over to squeeze my hand. Exactly right, sweetheart. Some people can't handle seeing others achieve their dreams. Dreams, Denise repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Harris stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. I need some air. Toby, can you keep an eye on Maddie? As Harris walked toward the cafe's exit, I saw him pull out his phone. Through the window, I watched him pace on the sidewalk, gesturing emphatically as he spoke to whoever was on the other end. Now look what you've done, I said to Denise. You've upset him with your ridiculous accusations. I've upset him. Denise's eyebrows rose. Eulalia, that boy has been miserable for months. He barely sleeps, he's lost weight, and he jumps every time his phone rings. You think I caused that in the last 5 minutes? Janet, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, tried to lighten the mood. Maybe we should talk about something else, like Maddie's school play next month. But I was tired of being diplomatic, tired of walking on eggshells around Harris's family and their thinly veiled disapproval. You want to know the truth, Denise? Harris can't handle having a wife who's more ambitious than he is. He's comfortable with mediocrity, but I'm not. I refuse to apologize for wanting more out of life. More what, exactly? Denise's voice was dangerously quiet. More recognition, more respect, more appreciation for what I bring to the table. And you get all of that from Patrick Gorski. The way she said his name made my blood run cold. I get it from doing excellent work and being valued by people who matter. People who matter, Denise repeated. Interesting choice of words. Toby cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should order more coffee. But Denise wasn't finished. Tell me, Eulalia, when did your marriage stop mattering? When did your family stop being enough? That's not fair, I protested, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Isn't it? You just said Harris doesn't appreciate you, that he's comfortable with mediocrity, that you need recognition from people who matter. Where does that leave your husband and daughter?" Maddie looked up from her pancakes with worried eyes. "Why is everyone mad?" "No one's mad, sweetheart," Elaine said quickly. "Grown-ups are just having a discussion." "A discussion about what?" Maddie asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. What were we discussing exactly? My marriage? My career? The growing distance between Harris and me that everyone seemed to notice except me. "We're talking about Mommy's new job," I said finally. "Is Daddy mad about your job?" Out of the mouths of babes, even a 7-year-old could see what I'd been trying to deny. "Daddy's not mad," I lied. "He's just adjusting." Through the window, I could see Harris still on his phone, but now he'd stopped pacing. He was standing perfectly still, listening intently to whoever was speaking. Something about his posture made my stomach clench with anxiety. "Adjusting to what?" Denise asked pointedly. "To having a wife who's finally getting the recognition she deserves. From Patrick Gorski." "From my employer, yes. Your married employer." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd been so careful never to mention Patrick's wife, never to acknowledge that complication even to myself. His marital status is irrelevant to our professional relationship. "Is it?" Denise leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having an affair with your boss, and he's paying you off with a promotion." The cafe seemed to go silent around us. Even Maddie stopped eating, sensing the gravity of what had just been said. "That's a disgusting accusation," I managed, but my voice shook with the effort. "It's an obvious conclusion," Denise replied calmly. "Late nights, weekend work, mysterious promotions, a husband who looks like he's dying inside. What else should I think?" Janet finally found her voice. "Denise, that's a serious accusation. You can't just..." "Can't just what? Point out what everyone's thinking." "I'm not thinking that," Elaine said firmly. "I'm thinking that some people are jealous of others' success." "Success," Denise said bitterly, "if that's what we're calling it." I stood up so quickly that my chair nearly toppled over. "I don't have to listen to this. Come on, Maddie, we're leaving." "But I'm not done eating," Maddie protested. "You can finish at home." As I gathered my purse and helped Maddie down from her booster seat, I caught sight of Harris through the window. He'd finished his phone call and was walking back toward the cafe, but something about his expression made my blood freeze. He looked like a man who'd just received very important information. "Eulalia," Denise called after me. "Running away won't change the truth." I turned back to face her, my daughter's hand clasped tightly in mine. "The truth is that I'm a successful woman with a bright future ahead of me. I'm sorry if that threatens you." "It doesn't threaten me," Denise said sadly. "It breaks my heart. For Harris, for Maddie, and even for you. Because whatever you think you're gaining, you're losing so much more." Harris appeared in the doorway just as I reached it, his face unreadable. "Ready to go?" he asked quietly. "More than ready." As we walked to the car, I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on my back. The morning that was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a nightmare of accusations and implications. "Daddy," Maddie said as Harris buckled her into her car seat, "why was Grandma Denise mean to Mommy?" Harris met my eyes over our daughter's head. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, sweetheart. It doesn't mean anyone's being mean." But I saw something in his expression that made me wonder if he agreed with his mother's disagreement. The drive home was silent, except for Maddie's chatter about her unfinished pancakes and the cartoon character napkins she'd wanted to keep. I stared out the window, replaying the conversation and wondering how much damage had been done. More importantly, I wondered what Harris had learned during that phone call, and whether Denise's accusations were about to become more than just suspicions. As we pulled into our driveway, Harris's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and I saw his expression harden. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Work, he said simply. But something told me it wasn't work at all. Something told me that whatever was coming next would make Denise's accusations look like gentle speculation, and I was running out of time to control the narrative. Monday morning arrived grey and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. The weekend had been a disaster of stilted conversations and meaningful looks between Harris and his family. Even Maddie had picked up on the tension, asking repeatedly why everyone seemed sad. I arrived at the office early, hoping to catch Patrick before the rest of the staff arrived. His corner office was already lit, and I could see him through the glass walls, reviewing what looked like personnel files. "Good morning," I said, knocking on his open door. Patrick looked up, and I was surprised by the coolness in his expression. Gone was the warm appreciation I'd grown accustomed to, replaced by something that looked almost like wariness. "Eulalia, come in and close the door." I did as he asked, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. The office smelled like expensive coffee and his cologne, scents that usually made me feel sophisticated and important. Today, they made me nervous. "How was your weekend?" I asked, trying to gauge his mood. "Complicated." Patrick leaned back in his chair, studying me with those sharp blue eyes. "I had some interesting conversations." My stomach dropped. "Oh? It seems there's been some talk about your promotion, questions about the timing, the circumstances." "What kind of questions?" Patrick's expression remained carefully neutral, the kind that could become problematic for both of us if they gained traction. I felt heat creep up my neck. "Patrick, we've been careful, professional. I don't understand why anyone would..." "Would what?" "Notice that I've been giving you preferential treatment, that your promotion came after months of private meetings and late-night work sessions." The words stung because they carried a grain of truth I'd been trying to ignore. "I earned this promotion. My work speaks for itself." "Does it?" Patrick opened one of the files on his desk. "Because looking at your performance reviews, while solid, they don't exactly scream senior coordinator material." I stared at him in shock. "Are you saying I don't deserve this position?" "I'm saying we need to be more careful about appearances. People are starting to connect dots." "What people?" Patrick hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "HR got a call this morning. Someone asking about our promotion criteria and whether there's a formal review process for advancement decisions." My blood turned to ice water. "Who called?" "They wouldn't say, but whoever it was knew specific details about your promotion timeline and asked pointed questions about our working relationship." I thought about Harris's mysterious phone call at the cafe, his strange behavior over the weekend, the legal pad covered in notes. "It was my husband." "You think?" "I know." The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. "He's been suspicious for weeks. His mother practically accused me of having an affair at brunch yesterday." Patrick's face went pale. "An affair? Eulalia, we agreed this was just..." "Just what?" I interrupted. "Just friendly, just professional, because it hasn't felt professional for months." "Keep your voice down." Patrick glanced toward his office door, even though it was closed. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. We can't afford to have these conversations here." "Then where can we have them? You're the one who suggested the early morning meetings, the late-night strategy sessions. You're the one who said I deserved better than what I was getting at home. I never told you to neglect your marriage." The accusation hit like a slap. "Neglect my marriage? Patrick, you've been the only person in my life who sees my value, who appreciates what I bring to the table. Harris barely notices when I'm in the room. That's not my problem to solve." His coldness was shocking after months of warmth and encouragement. "So what are you saying? That this was all just..." "What? A game?" Patrick ran his hands through his silver hair, suddenly looking every one of his 49 years. "I'm saying we need to step back and reassess, for both our sakes." "Step back how?" "No more private meetings, no more late nights unless there's a legitimate business need." And we need to document everything we do together from now on. I felt like he'd pulled the rug out from under me. You're scared. I'm being practical. I have a wife, Eulalia, a career, a reputation. I can't afford to have this blow up. And what about me? What about my reputation? You're the one who chose to pursue this path. I never forced you to do anything you didn't want to do. The words were like ice picks to my heart. Pursue this path? Patrick, you encouraged me. You said I was special, that I deserved recognition. You are special, but that doesn't mean we can ignore the consequences of our choices. I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time in months. Patrick Gorski wasn't the sophisticated mentor I'd imagined. He was a middle-aged man having a midlife crisis, and I'd been convenient entertainment until the stakes got too high. So that's it. You throw me a promotion to keep me quiet and then pretend nothing happened. I'm trying to protect both of us. You're trying to protect yourself. I stood up, my legs shaky with anger and humiliation. What happens when Harris keeps digging? When he finds proof of our meetings, our conversations? What proof? We've been discreet. Have we? Because apparently someone knows enough to call HR with specific questions. Patrick's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with obvious relief. I have a conference call in 5 minutes. We'll continue this later. When later? During business hours with witnesses present? Eulalia, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I walked to his door, then turned back. You know what the funny thing is? I actually thought you cared about me. Not just as a convenient distraction, but as a person. I do care about you. No, you care about not getting caught. There's a difference. I left his office and walked back to my cubicle on unsteady legs. The promotion that had felt so triumphant on Friday now felt like a consolation prize, a payoff to keep me from making trouble. Janet appeared at my desk within minutes, coffee in hand and concern written across her face. You look like hell, she said bluntly. Rough weekend. You could say that. I told her about the disastrous brunch, Denise's accusations, and Harris's suspicious behavior. Shit, Janet said when I finished. Do you think he knows for sure, or is he just fishing? I think he knows enough to be dangerous. Janet glanced around the office, then leaned closer. Eulalia, maybe it's time to consider damage control. What kind of damage control? Get ahead of the story. Frame it on your terms before Harris can twist it into something ugly. Frame it how? There's no good way to spin an affair with my married boss. Who says it was an affair? Maybe it was just a close working relationship that people misunderstood. Maybe Patrick was mentoring you, and jealous people read more into it than was there. I stared at her. Are you serious? I'm serious about protecting you. Harris is clearly building a case against you. His mother hates you, his family is suspicious, and now he's calling HR. You need to fight back. Fight back how? Make him the villain. Paint him as a controlling husband who can't handle his wife's success. Play the victim. The suggestion was tempting, but something about it felt wrong. Janet, I did have an affair. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. You had a close relationship with your boss that may have crossed some lines. That's different from a sordid affair. And honestly, what's Harris going to prove? That you worked late, that you and Patrick had meetings, that he gave you a promotion. He could prove more than that if he really dug. Like what? I thought about the text messages, the lingering looks, the Chinese takeout dinners in the conference room. The way Patrick had touched my shoulder when he thought no one was looking. The compliments that went beyond professional appreciation. Enough, I said quietly. My phone buzzed with a text from Harris. Need to talk when you get home tonight. Important. I showed the message to Janet, who whistled low. Okay, that doesn't sound good. No, it doesn't. Eulalia, I'm serious about getting ahead of this. If Harris is planning some kind of confrontation, you need to be ready. Ready how? With your own version of events, with evidence that he's been neglecting you, controlling you, making you feel undervalued. Turn his accusations back on him. It was manipulative and wrong, but I was running out of options. Patrick had made it clear he wouldn't protect me if things went bad. Harris was obviously building a case against me, and his family had already decided I was guilty. Maybe Janet was right. Maybe the only way to survive this was to go on the offensive. I need to think about it. Don't think too long. If Harris has evidence, he's not going to wait forever to use it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and second-guessing. Every phone call made me jump. Every email made my heart race. Patrick avoided me completely, walking past my cubicle without acknowledgement and taking his lunch in his office with the door closed. By 5 o'clock, I felt like a raw nerve. The drive home was torture, my mind racing through possible scenarios and explanations. What did Harris know? What could he prove? And what was I willing to do to protect myself? As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Harris's car was already there. The house looked normal from the outside, suburban, peaceful, the kind of place where families lived happily ever after. But I knew that inside, my husband was waiting with questions I didn't want to answer and evidence I couldn't deny. The game was almost up, and I was running out of moves. The house felt different when I walked in. Not physically. Everything was in its usual place, from Maddie's backpack by the door to Harris's coffee mug in the sink. But there was an electric tension in the air that made my skin prickle with unease. "Mommy!" Maddie ran to hug me, her small arms wrapping around my waist with fierce affection. "Daddy made mac and cheese for dinner." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I smoothed her blonde hair, grateful for the momentary normalcy. "Where is Daddy?" "In his office. He said he had important work to do." Important work. My stomach clenched as I remembered his cryptic text message. "Why don't you go wash your hands for dinner?" I suggested, buying myself a few minutes to prepare for whatever was coming. I found Harris exactly where Maddie had said, sitting at his desk with papers spread out in front of him, like a general planning a military campaign. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, and I was struck by how different he seemed. Gone was the distracted, worried man I'd been living with for weeks. This Harris was focused, determined, almost cold. "How was work?" he asked, his tone conversational. "Fine, busy." I stepped into the room, trying to read the papers on his desk without being obvious about it. "Maddie said you wanted to talk." "I do, but let's have dinner first, as a family." Something about the way he said, "as a family," made my blood run cold, but I nodded and followed him to the kitchen. Dinner was surreal. Harris chatted with Maddie about her day at school, helped her with her homework, and acted like the devoted father he'd always been. But I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, studying my face with those analytical eyes that missed nothing. "Mommy, you're not eating," Maddie observed. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. It was a long day." "Are you sick?" "No, just tired." After dinner, Harris read Maddie her bedtime story, while I cleaned up the kitchen, my hands shaking as I loaded the dishwasher. Every sound made me jump: the ice maker cycling, the neighbor's dog barking, the old house settling around us. When Harris finally came back downstairs, he poured himself a cup of coffee and gestured toward the kitchen table. "Shall we?" I sat across from him, noting how he'd positioned himself between me and the exit. Whether intentional or not, it felt strategic. "So," Harris said, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug, "how's the new position working out?" "It's an adjustment, but I'm enjoying the challenge." "I'm sure you are. Patrick Gorski seems like an interesting boss." The way he said Patrick's name made my skin crawl. "He's very professional. Demanding, but fair." "Demanding, yes, I imagine he is." Harris took a sip of his coffee, never taking his eyes off my face. "Tell me about these late nights you've been working." "What about them?" "Well, I'm curious about the timeline. When did they start, exactly?" I felt like a witness being cross-examined. "I don't know. A few months ago, when the Henderson account got complicated." "The Henderson account?" Harris nodded thoughtfully. "That would be around February, right?" I suppose. Interesting, because I looked at your pay stubs, and you started getting overtime pay in January. My mouth went dry. I might be misremembering the exact timeline. You might be. Or you might be lying. The word hung between us like a blade. Harris, I don't appreciate being interrogated in my own kitchen. Your own kitchen. He raised an eyebrow. Funny, I thought it was our kitchen, our house, our marriage. Of course it is. I just meant... I know what you meant. Harris stood and walked to the counter, retrieving a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. I've been doing some research, Eulalia. Want to know what I found? Not particularly. Too bad. He opened the folder and pulled out what looked like printed emails. These are your timesheet records from HR. Fascinating reading. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. According to these records, you've worked late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 4 months, plus several Saturdays. That's very consistent. I'm a dedicated employee. You are, but here's the interesting part. He pulled out another sheet of paper. I also requested the building's security logs, you know, the ones that track when employees badge in and out. My blood turned to ice. Turns out you've been badging out much earlier than your timesheets indicate, sometimes by hours. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. So, either you're committing timesheet fraud or you're lying about where you've been spending those extra hours. Harris, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear an explanation that makes sense. I scrambled for something, anything, that might sound plausible. Sometimes I work off-site, client meetings, research at the library. Client meetings. Harris nodded. With Patrick Gorski. Sometimes, yes. At night, on weekends, when necessary. Harris pulled out his phone and scrolled through something. That's funny, because I called the 3 biggest clients on your account list. None of them remember any evening or weekend meetings with you. The trap was closing around me, and I could feel my carefully constructed lies crumbling. Harris, why are you doing this? Why are you investigating me like I'm some kind of criminal? Because my wife has been lying to me for months, and I want to know why. I haven't been lying. Haven't you? He leaned forward, his voice deadly quiet. Let me ask you something, Eulalia. Are you having an affair with Patrick Gorski? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could lie, keep denying, try to gaslight him into thinking he was paranoid. But something about the way Harris was looking at me, not angry, just infinitely sad, made the fight go out of me. It's not what you think, I said quietly. What is it then? It's complicated. Harris closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, I saw something die in their depths. Complicated. Right. Harris, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been cheating on me with your married boss. How you've been lying to my face for months. How you've been using our daughter as an excuse to stay out late while you fuck another man. The crude language was so unlike him that I flinched. Don't be vulgar. Vulgar? Harris laughed, but there was no humor in it. My wife is having an affair, and you're worried about my language. It's not an affair. We have a connection. He understands me in ways that you don't. A connection. Is that what we're calling it? You don't understand what it's like, Harris, to feel invisible in your own marriage, to have a husband who barely notices when you're in the room. So this is my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying that Patrick makes me feel valued, appreciated, like I matter. And I don't. The pain in his voice almost broke my resolve, but I pushed forward. When was the last time you really looked at me, Harris? When was the last time you told me I was beautiful, or smart, or that you were proud of me? I tell you I'm proud of you all the time. No, you don't. You mumble congratulations when I get a promotion, but you don't really see me. Patrick sees me. Patrick is using you. He's not using me, he cares about me. Harris stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. Eulalia, He's a married man who's been having an affair with his subordinate. He gave you a promotion to keep you quiet. How is that not using you? You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Harris pulled out another paper from his folder. This is a printout of Patrick Gorski's LinkedIn profile. Want to know what it says about his family? I didn't want to know, but I couldn't stop him from continuing. He's been married for 22 years, has 3 kids, including a daughter about Maddie's age. His wife just finished treatment for breast cancer. The words hit me like physical blows. Patrick had never mentioned his wife's illness, never talked about his children beyond vague references to family obligations. That doesn't change anything between us, I said weakly. Doesn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're the other woman in a very typical story. Married boss, vulnerable employee, promises of advancement in exchange for sex. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, Eulalia. Make me understand how destroying our marriage was worth it. I tried to find words that would make him see, that would justify the choices I'd made, but sitting in our kitchen, looking at the man I'd promised to love and honor, I couldn't find any that made sense. I felt alone, I said finally. In our marriage, in my career, in everything, Patrick made me feel special. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to take something for myself, something that made me happy. Harris was quiet for so long that I wondered if he'd heard me. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Do you love him? The question caught me off guard. Did I love Patrick? Or did I love the way he made me feel about myself? I don't know. Do you love me? That question was even harder to answer. I looked at Harris, really looked at him, and saw the man I'd fallen in love with in college. Quiet, steady, devoted. The man who'd held my hand during labor, who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, who'd never once raised his voice to me in anger. I don't know, I whispered. Harris nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Well, at least you're being honest now. What happens now? Harris closed the folder and stood up. Now you pack a bag and go stay with your mother for a few days. Harris, please, we can work through this. Can we? Because I don't see how. You've been lying to me for months, Eulalia. Having an affair, stealing from our family time, using our daughter as an excuse to meet your lover. How do we work through that? Couples therapy, counseling. We can figure this out. You should have thought about that before you decided to fuck your boss. There was that crude language again, and I realized it wasn't just anger. It was pain so deep that it was coming out as something ugly and raw. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I'm so sorry, Harris. So am I, he replied. I'm sorry I wasn't enough for you. I'm sorry I failed as a husband. But mostly, I'm sorry for Maddie. She doesn't deserve to have her family destroyed because her mother was bored. Don't make this about Maddie. Everything is about Maddie now. She's the only thing that matters. Harris walked toward the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Eulalia? You'll be hearing from my lawyer in the morning. The words hit me like a physical blow. Your lawyer? Harris, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I want a divorce. You can't just decide that unilaterally. We have a daughter together, a life. We had a life. You decided it wasn't enough. As Harris disappeared upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of my marriage. The promotion that had felt so triumphant a few days ago now seemed hollow and meaningless. Patrick's promises of appreciation and recognition felt like the manipulations they'd always been. But it was too late for regrets. The damage was done, and tomorrow I'd have to face the consequences of choices I could never take back. I pulled out my phone to text Patrick, to warn him about what was coming. But as I started typing, I realized he probably already knew. A man like Patrick Gorski didn't survive in business without knowing how to protect himself when things went wrong. And I was definitely wrong now. The law office of Brennan, Walsh and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and intimidating efficiency. I sat in the reception area at 8:30 Tuesday morning, my hands shaking as I clutched a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Harris had been true to his word. At 7 a.m. sharp, a process server had appeared at my mother's door with divorce papers and a court summons. The documents were thick, official, and terrifyingly thorough. Mrs. Vane, a woman in her 40s, approached, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. I'm Jennifer Walsh. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. I followed her down a hallway lined with law books and diplomas, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The conference room she led me to was designed to intimidate. Massive table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city. Harris was already there, sitting next to a man I assumed was his attorney. He looked up when I entered, and I was shocked by how different he seemed. Gone was the hurt, broken man from last night's kitchen confrontation. This Harris was composed, determined, almost businesslike. Eulalia, he said with a polite nod. Harris. I took the seat across from him, noting the manila folders stacked in front of his lawyer. I can't believe you're really doing this. Believe it, said the man next to Harris. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. I'm David Brennan, Mr. Vane's attorney. We have a lot to discuss. Jennifer Walsh sat beside me and opened her own folder. My client is prepared to contest these proceedings. We believe the grounds for divorce are exaggerated and that Mr. Vane is acting hastily. Hastily? Brennan raised an eyebrow. Mr. Vane has documented evidence of adultery spanning several months. I'd hardly call his response hasty. My stomach dropped. What kind of evidence? Brennan opened the first folder and spread papers across the table like playing cards. Timesheet discrepancies, security badge records, cell phone GPS data, text message records, email communications. Shall I continue? I stared at the documents, recognizing my own digital footprints laid out in damning detail. How did you get all this? Your husband is an IT specialist, Mrs. Vane. He knows how to recover deleted data, track digital communications, and compile evidence. He's been very thorough. Harris spoke for the first time since I'd arrived. I gave you every chance to tell me the truth, Eulalia. When you chose to keep lying, I decided to find the truth myself. This is an invasion of privacy, I protested. Actually, it's not, Brennan replied calmly. Mr. Vane accessed records from shared devices and accounts. The cell phone is on a family plan under his name. The home computer belongs to both of you. Everything here was obtained legally. Jennifer leaned forward. What exactly are you alleging? Brennan pulled out a thick document. Adultery, specifically an ongoing sexual relationship between Mrs. Vane and her supervisor, Patrick Gorski, beginning in January of this year. You can't prove that, I said, though my voice sounded weak even to me. Can't I? Brennan opened another folder. Text messages between you and Mr. Gorski discussing private meetings and special projects. Email communications sent during off hours with personal content. GPS data showing your vehicle at locations other than your workplace during claimed overtime hours. He slid a paper across the table. This is particularly interesting. A text exchange from March 15th where Mr. Gorski writes, Last night was incredible. You deserve so much more than what you're getting at home. I felt the blood drain from my face. I'd thought I'd deleted that conversation. And your response? I know. Being with you makes me feel alive again. Harris doesn't even notice when I'm gone. Jennifer touched my arm, a warning to stay quiet, but I couldn't help myself. Those messages could mean anything. They don't prove we were having an affair. Brennan smiled coldly. You're right. By themselves, they're ambiguous. But combined with this, he produced another document. Hotel receipt from the Marriott downtown, March 15th. Room registered to Patrick Gorski with 2 key cards issued. My world tilted sideways. How did you... Hotel security footage, Harris said quietly. You're clearly visible entering and leaving the building. The timestamps match your text messages. At the mediation table, I finally saw my husband clearly. Not the neglectful man I'd resented, but a calm, methodical one who'd spent months quietly dismantling my life. Brennan slid folder after folder across the table. Restaurant charges on nights I'd claimed overtime. Lingerie and perfume I never wore at home. Hotel keycard logs. A promotion handed to me 3 months into the affair with Patrick Gorski. No review, no competition, just a quiet signature from my married boss. HR's own records called me meets expectations. Patrick had already given a signed statement to his company. My advances were inappropriate. The relationship never mutual. His wife knew. She was weighing her own lawsuit. Harris wanted the house, primary custody of Maddie, support, and my resignation from Gorski Logistics. Refuse, and they'd hand the timesheet fraud to the police. The joint accounts were already frozen. My clothes sat in boxes by the garage. I looked for a flicker of the man who once loved me. There was none. "You didn't fall in love," he said. "You traded our family for a raise." My lawyer asked for time. They gave us until Friday. I walked out homeless, soon to be jobless, and almost certainly about to lose my daughter. In the elevator down, I caught my reflection, a woman who'd bet everything on being wanted and discovered. Too late, that I never really was. Patrick's final text buzzed in. "Heard about the mess. Best we don't talk. Sorry it worked out this way." I deleted the message, the number, the last illusion. Game over. I lost.